Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So I guess this one is a review for the PBC card that went down this past weekend. Of course headlined by Lamont Roach versus Cruz. Going in, it was a fight card that was on the verge of falling apart. Of course, we were supposed to have Erislandy Lara versus Janibek Alimkanuli. Janibek failed a PED test, so he was withdrawn. Had a late replacement for Lara. Then you had Fulton blowing the weight against Oshaki Foster. That fight was then moved up to lightweight. So the card had a lot of problems going in. It's a shame because on paper going in it was a good card, but it didn't quite live up to what it promised. Me personally, that's how I feel anyway. But let's briefly run through this card and we'll have our say on it. I will say I haven't seen Jesus Alejandro Ramos versus Shane Mosley Jr. That fight was for a WBC interim middleweight championship, and the fight was won by Ramos Jr. by a UD. Pretty comprehensive just by looking at the scorecards, but again, I haven't seen that fight, so I can't really comment on it, quite frankly. I did, however, watch the return of Frank Martin at 140. He fought the old former world champion, Bartholomew. Bartholomew, seen better days, been very inactive in recent years, 39 years old, on the downward slide of his career. In there with Frank Martin, who was making his return, of course. And Frank Martin did his job, He was last seen last year when he got stopped by Tank Davis at lightweight. In that fight, I actually felt he gave Tank a decent fight for a while. But ultimately, I felt he kind of got stage fright in that bout because he was doing things in there at times that were giving Tank trouble, but he couldn't maintain it and he got knocked out. On his return, he looked good. He looked forceful. He looked authoritative in there against Bartholomew. Don't get me wrong, at super lightweight, there's going to be stiffer tests than a guy like Bartholomew. But he went in there behind that southpaw stance. He was looking for that power left hand. He was looking for big right hooks. He was trying to pressure. He was trying to force for pace. He was trying to make a statement. And that's exactly what he did. Bartholomew was in there and he was throwing sort of get off me punches, He was doing that veteran thing of just trying to get through the rounds. But, Frank Martin didn't let him rest. He dropped him twice in round 4. First knockdown was a right hook followed by a left hand. And Bartholomew was hurt on that first knockdown. It was the left hand, the southpaw left hand that caused the damage. But he beat the count. He got up and Martin immediately jumped on him. He threw a combination. Bartholomew got through the initial combination, but Martin reset and he lined up Bartholomew for a 1-2, southpaw 1-2, and the left hand detonated on the chin, dropped Bartholomew hard, and basically knocked him out cold. It was quite a savage knockout for Frank Martin. Now, again, you can't read too much into this one because of the state of Bartholomew, but, Frank Martin did what he needed to do. And, he puts his name out there for a big fight in America, I guess, maybe against the likes of Cruz, against Lamont Roach, those sort of guys who fought in the main event. But yeah, he's put his name back in the mix, I guess. We'll see where he goes next, but all things considered, I felt he looked good in there, to be honest. I felt he looked good. We move on to a middleweight title fight, Erislandy Lara versus Johan Gonzalez. Johan Gonzalez, of course, was a last-minute replacement for Janibek Alimkanuli. Lara was supposed to fight Alimkanuli in a unification fight at middleweight. They drafted in Johan Gonzalez as a last-minute replacement, 34-year-old Venezuelan fighter. Snazzy record on paper. He went into this one with a 36-4 record with 34 knockouts, but you look at his ledger and he's not really beat anybody of consequence. I know he beat Jarrett Hurd last time out, but Jarrett Hurd is a shot fighter, quite frankly. But they dug this guy out as a last-minute replacement, and he was thoroughly outboxed by a 42-year-old Erislandy Lara. He was dropped twice in this fight also, once in the first round and I think once in the 12th round. I think it was late, the second knockdown. And it was Lara doing his thing, Lara boxing behind his southpaw stance, firing the straight left hand, countering when he could, not taking many risks, and yeah, thoroughly outboxing his man. You know, it was what it was. 42-year-old Lara. Listen, you can tell the guy has lost a step, obviously from his prime. He's 42 years old, but he's still in great shape. He can still move. He's still got a bit of pop behind his punches. There's still a bit of speed there. And despite being 42 years old, yeah, like I say, past his prime, absolutely. Is he a shot fighter? From what I see, no. He's still going, and he's still getting results. I know this dude he fought was no great shakes, I get it, but 42 years old at middleweight, regardless of the opponent, it's still quite impressive, you know. He's kept himself in great shape, Lara, over the years, and that has to be commended. Not always the most entertaining fighter, but he's effective at what he does, and even at this age, if he's fighting a guy at that level, he's going to thoroughly outbox them, and that's exactly what he did, you know. Lara retains his WBA middleweight title. I think he's got the WBA. But yeah, UD, I don't think Gonzalez won a round, quite frankly, and Lara does his thing. We move on to the biggest disappointment on this card. Stephen Fulton versus Oshaki Foster. Now, originally, this was supposed to be for the WBC super featherweight title held by Oshaki Foster. Going into this fight, Stephen Fulton blew the weight by like 2 pounds, couldn't make the weight. The fight goes ahead. Instead, though, it's contested at lightweight. Basically, it's a lightweight fight, and the WBC interim lightweight title is put on the line last minute. You know, disgraceful, really, the fact that Stephen Fulton's missing weight the way he did, and he was still awarded a title shot at lightweight. I know it's an interim title, but it's still a title. That's a disgrace. That's an absolute disgrace. And then he goes in there and performs the way he did. No effort, no intensity. He looked like a man made to order for Oshaki Foster. Oshaki Foster did his thing, you know, boxed to a plan, started to beat up Stephen Fulton as that fight went on. The straight punches of Oshaki Foster, the combinations at times also. You know, Foster was just levels above in regards to his boxing. Not only was he levels above in regards to his boxing, though, he also looked fitter. He looked stronger. It looked like he trained more. You know, I'm not sure what Stephen Fulton was doing in camp. Have to be honest. He didn't look great on the scales from what I saw. You know, really, really disappointing, because on paper, this was arguably the most competitive fight, you know. People had this one going either way from what I was seeing. Some people were picking Fulton, others were picking Oshaki Foster. But yeah, Fulton blows the weight. In the fight, he was very uninspiring. But Foster, you know, professional, disciplined, did his thing, outboxed Stephen Fulton. Fulton couldn't get near him, quite frankly. The height and reach of Foster was a problem for Fulton. You know, Foster has very good fundamentals, especially, like I say, in regards to his straight punches. Really good understanding of distance, and he was catching Fulton on the end of those straight punches all night long. He actually buzzed up Fulton a couple of times to my eye. And yeah, Fulton was just better on every level in comparison to Stephen Fulton. And, you know, Stephen Fulton needs to take a good, hard look at himself in the mirror, because that wasn't a guy who put in maximum effort in training, nor in the fight. You know, you could see the shape of him in the fight. I felt he looked a little pudgy, a little soft, you know. And yeah, again, Foster just too professional, too good for Stephen Fulton. And we'll see what Foster does next. You know, is he going to stay at super featherweight, or is he now going to campaign at lightweight? We shall see. But, you know, I know the nature of this win has asterisks next to it because of Fulton, but, you know, Fulton is still a decent name. And, you know, Foster's building a decent little resume quietly. Got a win over Conceição, got a win over Fulton, got a win over Eduardo Hernandez, a win over Ray Vargas, Muhammad Yakubov as well. So he's building a nice little resume, Oshaki Foster, under the radar, and he's a good fighter. But we move on to the main event, a fight in which has generated some controversy online. That being Isaac Cruz versus Lamont Roach, WBC interim super lightweight title on the line. Now, I think the consensus online, well, from what I see, is that Lamont Roach won this fight and got jobbed. I can see the argument for Roach winning. And I think if anybody probably deserved it, it was Roach. Do I think a draw's a terrible result, though? Like a robbery? I don't think so, personally. I don't think so. Listen, I felt the start of this fight, Isaac Cruz started very well. Aggressive, fighting out of that crouch like he does. He was firing that sort of overhand right, like that kind of baseball pitcher overhand right, and he was throwing it from low and coming over the top. And he was catching Lamont Roach, who has a low lead hand, with that shot. And I felt in the first 6 rounds, Cruz started the better. He obviously dropped Lamont Roach in the 3rd round. Roach opened up and Cruz basically threw with him. Isaac Cruz threw a left hook, bang on the chin, and it drops Lamont Roach. After 6 rounds, I think, Isaac Cruz was maybe 4 rounds to 2 up, plus a knockdown. Second half of this fight, though, Isaac Cruz slowed down. Lamont Roach was keeping it at distance better, and he was countering Cruz effectively as well from the outside. But he was also mixing it up. He was throwing at mid-range. At times he was exchanging with Cruz. He was making Cruz miss and then firing back. It looked like it was turning into Roach's fight. He was starting to claw it back and was ahead, I would say, going into the championship rounds. Bear in mind, Isaac Cruz also had a point deduction in round 7 for, I think it was a kidney punch. I might be wrong on that, but I think it was a kidney punch. So yeah, going into the championship rounds 11 and 12, you'd probably say Roach was up at this point. Having said that, I felt that Isaac Cruz closed those last 2 rounds quite well. He pressured Roach. The left hook he had success with earlier in the fight was coming into play again. He caught Roach a few times with that left hook. And he was exchanging more effectively with Roach, I would say, in those last 2 rounds. And for me, he landed the harder shots in those last 2, And when you look at the first 6 rounds and you look at the last 2 rounds, listen, I think it's very easy to argue that a draw is a fair result, personally. I don't get the outroar in regards to the decision, personally. I think the commentary team were very much pro Lamont Roach, the Amazon Prime PBC commentary. And let's be honest, commentary definitely clouds people's judgment on how to score a fight. But, having watched this fight like a day after it actually happened, I really don't understand the outroar and outrage about this decision. I don't understand it personally. In fact, there's a fair few people actually had Pitbull winning this fight, and yeah, it was one of them ones. It was competitive, it was close. I don't really have many issues with a draw, I'll be honest. From my first viewing, I wasn't scoring it like mad close or anything, but I could easily see that there were rounds that could easily be given to Pitbull, and there's enough there that he's got a share in the fight, as far as I'm concerned. I think another factor as well is because Roach is coming off that Tank fight where a lot of people felt he won, including myself. And, because he's in a close fight now, maybe people are giving him a bit too much credit, kind of thing, But yeah, it is what it is, man. It was a close fight. It was a good fight. It was keenly contested. And, yeah, it was actually quite an enjoyable fight, to be fair. So, listen, why not have it again? Why not do a rematch? First quarter of next year. Let's go. It was a good fight, like I say. Good fight. But anyway, share your thoughts below. Being your guy, Del Boy. Peace.